Thanks, Paul, for that, and congratulations, by the way, to your organization on this first event of its kind. Hello.
One of these onto your lapel jacket, please.
What is it?
It's for one of our members to hear you clearly. Thank you very much.
Fine. It's so that somebody can hear me clearly. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's highly appropriate that I'm actually wearing a hearing device myself as well. I find it works at conferences where sometimes the sound equipment and the general acoustics aren't particularly brilliant. Anyway, congratulations on this first event of its kind. And you're probably thinking, he doesn't look anything like a futurologist. Well, I'm sorry, I don't have the Harry Potter costume with me today, but we're not wizards. We don't believe in magical devices. We're just humans like everybody else. And I spent, as Paul said in his introduction, working around the world with different kinds of organization, large and small, government departments, even charities, trying to help them become a little bit more future-proof, if you like. And I've discovered, as I sort of set off on my journey with you this morning, that I've discovered that actually people tend to make one of two very common mistakes when they think about the future. They think it's magical anyway, but the first mistake people make often is they think the future is something that happens to other people. So that's okay, don't have to worry about it. Put the 5-year plan back in the drawer, maybe go down the pub or watch a movie or whatever. The other mistake people make is they think that the future, whatever it is something that happens in, I don't know, July 2024, 5-6 years down the road. So again, don't have to worry about it. The point is very simple, that no sector and no profession, no business sector or profession functions in a vacuum. It operates in the real world. And that real world, ladies and gentlemen, is being transformed and will be transformed over the next 5 to 10 years in a way we've never seen before. We will see more disruptive change, innovation in the next 5 to 10 years than we saw in the whole of the 20th century. So we've got a lot to sort of catch up with here. What is my role this morning? I hope, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not in your profession or your manufacturing sector, but what I like to feel is that I'm actually going to set the big picture out, if you like. And where do we get our stuff? They said, where do you get your stuff? Do you just want to make it up on the train coming up or whatever, you know, or lash it together on a long-haul flight? Not really. No, it's a very holistic profession, the futurist. And by the way, talking of professions, you know, Birmingham has always played a big role in my professional life. My first appointment as a university teacher after my PhD work was actually in the University of Birmingham, right up here. And when I went into television, I did actually have a big row with the BBC after a while and went off and joined Central Television here in Birmingham. So, and had 2 or 3 very happy years presenting a program called Left, Right, Centre. So, as I say, this city has great memories for me, and it's always nice to be back here. But where do I get my stuff? Well, read very widely. My website calls me an historian of the future, top left. So, yeah, I do have a master's and PhD in history, so I suppose I'm a professional historian. But you know what? If you look at the top right here, as I look at the world of tomorrow, I'm increasingly becoming a sociologist of the future. I think to understand the world of tomorrow, we really have to understand people and people's expectations and people's attitudes and beliefs and convictions and all of those things, their conduct, their behavior, and what they want out of life. And I think Paul picked up on a very important point there it's about well-being. Healthcare and well-being, and good hearing healthcare is very much part of that. So that's where I get my stuff from, as wide as I can read. If I see a book or hear a speech or read an article, even overhear a conversation, and I think, my God, you know, that is really insightful, I'll use it. I'll always tell you where I got it from, but I will use it. Why should I reinvent the wheel? And I'll share those ideas with people like you good selves. So you put all those little ideas together, and they're really bits of a jigsaw. And when you put the bits of a jigsaw together, you get the big picture. So really that's what I want to sketch out this morning, in a way framing these marvelous presentations that Paul outlined for today and tomorrow, to give a big picture background. So that's where I'm coming from. And I suppose, being an ex-journalist, we have an irritating habit of telling you what we're going to say and then saying it, you know, coming up after the break, you know, after these words, etc. So I will actually share with you what I think is the big picture for your sector, your professional area. I won't read all these things out like a school teacher, but basically, in the 2020s and beyond, we're going to see more transformational change than we've seen in over a century, possibly over 150, 200 years. And the fast expanding digital universe of this future, these innovations will offer exciting possibilities in your area. And the point to remember is that the future starts now, right now. We are in the future. Again, Paul mentioned the pace of change. Trying to explain to Neanderthal man, all those thousands of years ago, what an iPhone was. But I think the important thing that we do, futurologists, is to try and manage the pace of change, if you like, and explain it to other people. And I think possibly the best way I can share that with you, some observation on the pace of change, is actually through something that you can hear. So, for example, this is a birthday card. And you're probably thinking, where's this going? Chelsea Football Club, yeah. Sorry, it's the only one I could find. This is a birthday card, cost me about £4.50 a few weeks ago. It's a singing birthday card. Now, why am I sharing that with you? Because that singing birthday card cost me, as I say, about £4.50, has more computing power than the onboard computers of Apollo 11, the Apollo 11 mission, the mission that put Neil Armstrong on the moon. And to be precise about it, it had 2K of memory, the onboard computer, and they put men into space and men on another planet. 2K of memory. Most of you probably got iPhones with you, and it's probably got, 128, 250 gigabytes of memory? And they could still do it. And by the way, the photograph there in the bottom right-hand corner is a picture of the scientists back at base in Houston, the people who were running that entire mission, complex mission. And that actually is a still that's taken from the movie, the Tom Hanks movie, Apollo 13. You remember when the back of the bus blew up on takeoff and they had to get those three brave men back to Earth safely, and they did, of course. But they're using slide rules. Didn't even have computers. Now, the slide rule was invented in 1632. So I think in a nutshell, we can see there what massive progress we've made in one generation of computing. One generation. So it's that pace of change that we really have to get used to. If you look at the top line here, agricultural revolution took, 8,000 years? And then we get to the other end of it, the right-hand end. Human genome sequencing, which started about 2003. The whole genomics history took about 8 years. And if you look at the far right there, the next generation, and I'll touch on this in my comments, is about the future of the brain. The future of the brain. So there you see, in one map, 100 years of computing progress. And it is quite dramatic, is it not? So what do I mean when I talk about disruption? Well, tomorrow's world, shaped by disruption. You might think, well, that's pretty negative, disruption. It means destroy, it means negative stuff. It's not, actually. In fact, to quote a very famous economist, Joseph Schumpeter, in the 1930s, creative destruction, he called it. Creative destruction. Disruption is about moving on, mutating, generating change, moving on to new business models, and indeed for the professions, moving on to new professional business models as well. And that's really my message this morning, that we're all of us moving into a completely new universe. Creative destruction is the process of industrial mutation that incessantly revolutionizes the economic structure from within. Now, you might think, well, that's a bit old-fashioned, Schumpeter, 1930s. There's a very famous visionary in my game, in the futurist game, called Ray Kurzweil, who actually is an inventor and visionary. He's actually chief engineer now at Google. He invented the flatbed scanner and so on. He's a bit balmy, but a lot of us are. I guess it takes that to be one of us, I think. He put it in a nutshell a little while back, just 6 or 8 months ago. Because of the explosive nature of exponential growth, the 21st century will be the equivalent to 20,000 years of progress at today's rate of progress. So he does tend to overblow it a bit, Ray, but I mean, in a way, he's got his finger on it. It's exactly the sort of thing we need to get to know. And the pace of change in the next 5, 10 years will make the 20th century look snail pace by comparison. So what are these future drivers? What's making this disruption probable? Well, I said earlier that I borrow a lot from other organizations and other people whose ideas I respect. And one of the organizations I read a lot with is the McKinsey Institute, and indeed their offshoot, the McKinsey Global Institute, the consultants. And they, a little while back, said, well, all these disruptive technologies, hundreds of them, but let's have a look at the ones that we really think are very important. And they put up a list of 12. Here they are. You probably think, on the left-hand side there, you probably think, well, I know a little bit about some of those, like internet and mobile internet and, cloud and Internet of Things. And when you get down to lower down, you're getting into things like advanced materials, next generation genomics and all the rest of it. And those are really important areas as well. And I thought, well, 12's not bad, but they could have done a bit better. So I thought I'll add my own list, and this is my list on top of it. By the way, that first initial report on the 12 great disruptive technologies does not even include artificial intelligence. And yet, AI, artificial intelligence, is going to become crucial to the future of your particular line of work. Now, you might be thinking here, artificial intelligence, life sciences, clean technology, high-tech agriculture, space age, let's have a look. Well-being technology, Paul mentioned in his introduction, the whole concept of well-being. I believe in the next 10 years or so we're going to see a well-being revolution. And I'm delighted to see that the whole hearing profession, hearing health profession, will be part of that well-being revolution. I believe it will happen. And I think it's important that we recognize this. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, they're all very interesting, but what have they got to do with me? I'm in the hearing healthcare. Well, the fact is that most of them are creating a new environment in which your industry and the healthcare industry in the wider sense are going to be totally transformed. So they are relevant to you. And you might think, what about blockchain? Blockchain is like cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and all that stuff. All of these things have implications, and I believe well-being technology, by the way, will include your own works of art as well. So that's where I come from. That's what is driving disruption in the future, and is creating a completely different universe in every possible business sector and every possible area of activity. Again, I'm not going to go through these in great detail because time will not allow me to, but how we travel, how we make stuff, how we relate, bottom right-hand corner, how we engage with our colleagues, how indeed one day you, as audiologists, some of you, will actually engage with your patients, giving them advice. You'll do it virtually. You'll do it through virtual reality and things like that. So the new realities are very much part of this disruptive future that will change the way you do things. Some of those things you might think of, you're already aware of, drones and so on. But what drones can do and what driverless cars can do in the long run impinge directly on the sort of things that you will be doing yourselves. Here's some other ones. Top left, healthcare, genome sequencing, particular kinds of food. Bottom right, vertical farming. I shouldn't think there's a great deal of connection between vertical farming and what you all get up to, but it's just interesting to know that the future of food for me is up. We will grow our food upwards, probably in cities as well. So massive change coming down the pipeline, and we've got to get used to it. And you might think, well, healthcare is a sort of fringe activity in terms of all of this, but you're not really in the same argument here. A disrupted healthcare future is something that's going to be absolutely central. And I do include your areas of activity very much in that as well, because it's about well-being as much as anything. It's not about being curative or healing injuries and healing conditions. It's actually about creating a much more well-rounded lifestyle in the future. And this is the big picture. Disruption drives a healthcare revolution, including in your field. Mobile care services, wireless health devices, home monitoring, etc., etc., etc. A massive list of things that will overtake the healthcare sector, the healthcare industry in general. And the interesting thing about this, and this is probably a bit of a first, is that the future of medicine and healthcare and well-being actually will be mainly driven by disruptive non-medical factors. That's the point. That's probably not happened before. Non-medical factors. What's making a difference is digital connectivity, smart sensors, big data analytics, nanorobotics, personalization. I could go on and on and on. And none of those are particularly medical by background, are they? So when you look at all of these, the future of hearing healthcare, the ones I would pick on in terms of their direct relevance and importance are things like artificial intelligence, AI, 3D printing. I'm sure you're all aware of 3D printing, are you not? Yeah. Well, get ready for it. Once you've got your head around that, the next thing along is 4D printing, but I'll leave that for the moment. 3D printing. The Internet of Things, everything connected to everything else. Here in Birmingham right now, they're conducting a very interesting pilot project that futurists like us are actually looking at with great interest. They've actually taken a neighborhood and actually joined up absolutely everything. Post boxes, traffic lights, wheelie bins, everything has got a sensor on it. And they reckon it won't be long before they can actually give out a neighborhood weather forecast, if you really want one. I don't know, my experience of Birmingham is it usually rains every other day anyway, but you know, that's coming along. Life science is very important. You know, how we apply the revolutions of genomics and so on to the way our bodies function and things like that. Cloud. All of these, in my view, are directly relevant to the future of your sector, of your industry. Virtual reality, advanced materials, whether it's graphene, whether it's willow glass, whether it's carbon nanotubes, these are all going to revolutionize the way airplanes are made, for example, and even hearing devices are made. Well-being technology. As I said, that's the sort of thing I think I see quite clearly coming down the highway in this future. It's going to create whole new eras of industry, industries we don't even have at the moment, or industries that are very small. But look at top left there, batteries. The whole battery revolution is just beginning, actually. Again, graphene playing a key part. And you don't need me to tell you how important the battery side, the energy side of your industry is. Very important. Right through to toiletries, right through to cloud, data, education, blockchain again. Blockchain is not simply cryptocurrencies, by the way. It's a transactional technology as well that can be applied in practically every other area of activity. So it's important that. And healthcare specifically is probably one of the top three. I mean, automotive, aviation, things like that are going to be very, very important, transportation. But a key area where the future will have massive impact is in healthcare itself. And that will embrace everything you all do as well, sure. And, you know, you've got a very big future ahead of you by the look of it. According to the World Health Organization, by the mid-century, we're getting on for a billion people on this planet with hearing impairment in some form or another. 1 in 10 of them children, by the way. So there's a big area for you to look after, to take care of in the years ahead. So, hearing healthcare, I said earlier, the future is now. We're surrounded by it. And so I'll touch on 1 or 2 of the things that are happening right now and then have a quick look at 1 or 2 of the things that might happen later on in the 2025s, 2030s, and thereafter. Harnessing big data, you might think, well, that's nothing to do with us. It's actually central to gaining insights. Big data is not just enough about size, it says there in the yellow box. It finds insight from complex, noisy, heterogeneous, longitudinal and voluminous data. Absolutely. In the end, data will make the difference between effective healthcare and less effective healthcare. It's not something simply that's been used in the banking industry or the computing industry. So when we look at big data analytics, giving evidence and insights, that's where it'll make a key difference in the world of audiology. It actually will be able to give us, probably put people like us out of business, because big data analytics will be increasingly predictive analytics. We can then predict the process of a particular condition, healthcare condition, of where it might go next and how it can be best treated. So game changers, all of this. Real-time predictive analytics. There it is. Are you all familiar with this, the Evotion app? I think it's a fairly typical example of where it can actually move into your world in a very big and very important way. Hyper-connected healthcare, everything joined up, everything connected to everything else, what we call the Internet of Things. By the mid-2020s, looking ahead, on the left-hand side, something like 27 billion connected sensors, IoT connections, Internet of Things connections. And people say, where do you get the number from? 27 billion. I haven't a clue. I haven't a clue. If you say, how many are there going to be? I said, what, 50 billion? I don't know, 50 billion, maybe 10 billion? I don't know, actually. I don't know where they get these numbers from. But I know it's going to be a lot. I know it's going to be huge. And there, at the moment, even right now, there are more inanimate objects connected to the internet than there are people on the planet. So we passed that point about 2008. And so it's probably double that now. So there are, what, 7 or 8 billion people on the planet. There's probably 14 to 15 billion connections. And it's growing exponentially at an absolutely massive rate. And healthcare is going to be right there in the middle of it. Top left, percentage of Internet of Things devices found in healthcare, about 30%, 1 in 3. By the mid-2020s, the predicted global worth of Internet of Things in healthcare, 2.5 trillion. Ooh, that's a big number. I mean, Ronald Reagan used to say $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking real money. Well, that is real money. That's 2.5 trillion. That's huge. It's going to be a mammoth, mammoth impact within the healthcare environment. And actually, when you look at the figures more closely, housing industry, infrastructure, retail, healthcare actually is the biggest. It's biggest. So it could be easily the biggest, most important beneficiary of the Internet of Things, something we didn't really think about as futurists when people started talking about the Internet of Things. By then it'll be the Internet of everything. And indeed, it'll be the Internet of me in terms of health, because all of us, by the mid-2020s, will have measuring systems, wearable technologies, and eventually implant technologies that can actually monitor every single vital signal of our being. So we are becoming ourselves part of the Internet of Things. Telemonitoring, it'll be quite normal for you as audiologists, I don't know how many here are, I know most of you are from the industry, is actually the way you will deal with your patients without ever seeing them, actually, without ever seeing them remotely. Here, for example, on the right-hand side is a patient receiving care and having various tests and monitoring and so on, all of it pushed through the cloud, all of it remote. So for better or worse, you don't even have to see in person a specialist to go into that particular area of healthcare there on the right-hand side. So telemonitoring will come your way as well as the way of healthcare in general. I suppose in the end, hospitals will become sort of an irrelevance almost. You'll do it remotely. I just finished reading a book called The Patient Will See You Now. A sort of inversion, really, of our regular kind of experience, if you like, with medics, with GPs. You won't have to see them. Bioprinting, 3D printing has got a spin-off of being able to print bits of the body. Print a tissue dot by dot, a drop of ink contains 10,000 to 30,000 cells. Stem cells, fat cells, bone marrow cells, etc., etc. So you can print whatever you need. Print the human body. And people say, well, one day I suppose we can have 3D printing of human organs. One day? Excuse me. If you want to see a 3D printed artificial heart, go to Nottingham University. They've already produced them. If you want to see artificial noses, anyone here want a nose job? Not necessarily, but they can bioprint them. Takes about 48 hours, go to Sheffield University and other universities around the world. It's not a UK monopoly, this. And so all of these things are coming into the everyday world in a way we never thought before. Bioprinting, 3D printed hearing aid shell, there you go. You'll be using that every day within about 5 years. What about the new realities? What are they? Virtual reality, augmented reality, hybrid reality, all those things. Now, traditionally, we think, oh, yeah, VR. It's those things that kids wear, isn't it? And go around pretending they're climbing Everest. No longer. It is actually a central part of everyday life. And indeed, in the healthcare sector, it's becoming very important. So look at this one. This is a VR, virtual reality game. It's called The Maze. And what they do is the patient wears the headset and is then taken through the maze, and they then can measure the activity of the brain in reaction to that. What are they using it for? To diagnose possibilities of dementia and Alzheimer's. That's important, is it not? That's important. And actually, I read a piece the other day that I thought you might want to hear from. Virtual reality isn't just for the gaming community. For audiologists, this is the perfect time to start examining how we can use this technology to move our own profession forward. That's Dr. Lewis from Boydstown National Research Hospital in Nebraska in the United States. And I'm sure there'll be further speakers on this, and tomorrow morning, I gather, you're going to have a chance to hear a specialist on artificial intelligence as well. So, all of that coming down the pipeline. New materials, new possibilities. I mentioned graphene and others, but graphene is a miracle. Graphene is a miracle material. It's 200 times more powerful than steel. It's the hardest material ever tested. It's a massive conductor of electricity and other signals. Massively strong, massively flexible. A British invention developed actually at Manchester University. The two people who developed it a few years back got the Nobel Prize. Graphene, amazing material. And there you go. A graphene diaphragm in this particular prototype. I don't know how many in the room are already onto this as a possibility, but this is the graphene century in many respects. It's the graphene century. They'll be making aircraft from it. They'll be making cars. They'll be making anything that has materials, if you like. The graphene home of the future, even. So let's push forward a little bit further then. Got a little bit of time to go. Hearing healthcare in the horizon of 2030. It's a long way off, but I think you're pushing the envelope there. Personally, I think you're beginning to get into another era. But, 2030 and thereafter is going to be a very interesting period. I mean, men and women will be flying to Mars by then. The NASA space program, man's missions to Mars will begin around 2030. They're actually already hiring astronauts for that program. They're only 14, 15 years old, but they'll be ready by the 2030s. So a lot of things are going to be happening. Hearing and technology today, I think I'd like to put you in perspective as an historian of the future. Well, I say historian of the future. Somebody who reads a lot of history, but also reads about the past in order to understand where we are now, and possibly in the future as well. And I think if you put hearing aid technology today into the historical concept, you're about where mobile phones were 25 years ago. This is what a mobile phone kit looked like 25 years ago. And I remember, because of the work I did working in a television business, I was one of the first to have a mobile phone in my car. And it had a battery in the boot about the size of an industrial toaster. And once you got out of London or Birmingham, useless anyway, because there weren't any cells, there weren't any mobile cells. And so they were completely useless technology, really. And that was 1985, 86. Obviously, we've all got iPhones or similar things now, and we know how far we've come. But that's how far we've come. This is the phone of today. This is a flexible one that you can stick in your back pocket, or it might look like this. And the point I'm trying to make here is that phones now are multiple use devices, are they not? They do all sorts of things, and that's what Paul was alluding to. You mentioned that conversation with those Neanderthals in those caves all those years ago. What is a mobile, or what is an iPhone, what is a smartphone? Well, it's very smart, very smart. And if I were to stand back and say, how's the sort of hearing health business matched up to that? Well, you're still a long way back down the track, in my view. So, got a lot of work to do. I think the future for you guys is about sensor-rich, multi-purpose, hearable devices. Things that do a lot more than simply what they sound as if they do. I think that's just beginning, really. So 2030 and beyond, we're looking at some top technologies here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but you get a picture here. 4D printing on the left, you might think, oh, I don't even know about 3D. No, you're banging on about 4D. What's the fourth dimension? The fourth dimension is time. Time. And 4D printing will be able to print objects that then change over time, mutate to suit their function, suit their environment. And you might think, well, that's not particularly relevant to the healthcare set. Oh, yes, it is. Because by that time, you can introduce nano 4D printing objects, nano meaning tiny, tiny, about the size of a grain of sand, into the patient's body. And they then can mutate into the purpose that they're designed for and the environment at the time. Be far more accurate in terms of targeting a particular condition, healthcare condition. So it is important. So those are the great hypes, if you like, of the future. Smart pills, wireless electricity. What a wonderful idea, wireless electricity. Imagine a home with none of those plugs and wires and stuff. Wonderful. I don't know why we haven't got there earlier, actually. I think it'll be wonderful when it comes. And then example one is 4D printing. Print anything you want, and it'll change in order to match the function it's designed for. And some people say, well, that's a bit sort of futuristic. Not much point having it, though, is there? What's the point? Go and talk to a pipeline engineer. They're very excited with 4D printing because they have the problem of maintaining and replacing underground piping, for example, for water and other utilities. And they don't want to dig up a busy road. You don't have to with this. You can actually introduce the 4D piping object into a confined and difficult accessible space, and it will change and become adaptable to the environment and do its job. So I think that's got a huge future ahead of it. Anyway, example two, smart pills. I've just given you a couple of these just to show you what huge possibilities there are in the healthcare sector generally. Vital signs monitoring, diagnostic imaging, target drug, very highly targeted drug delivery. And when people talk about robots and robotology and so on, they think it's all about tin men and women. Well, it's not. Robots don't work like that, actually. Nanorobotics is about minute robots that can actually be introduced into the patient and go off and do their job in a much more accurate and much more effective way than traditional hardwired drugs, if you like. Wireless electricity, yep, I said a moment ago, God, I can't wait for that. Get rid of all those wires and so on. It's doable, it's just that nobody's ever got around to spending the money to introduce new infrastructure. And coming soonish, as I say, the fourth dimension, 4D printing, there you go. And I don't think it's going to be very big, a very long time, probably mid to late 2020s probably. Again, bottom right-hand corner, the medical field in general is going to have an enormous impact here. Imagine having a hearing device that's 4D printed and then can be introduced into the relevant part of the patient's body, and off it goes, changes and mutates to suit its role. It could be invisible, could actually be inside the head rather than external. So anyway, you can see where I'm going there. I think the other side of it is this whole thing of monitoring the future digital self, because we now need to talk, I think, about the Internet of Me, as I mentioned a moment ago. And surely it doesn't take a great leap of imagination to recognize that the multi-purpose hearing device of the future will be a monitoring device, not simply for hearing. It'll be actually for monitoring in the way that all these other wearables are already doing. Now, look, the digital health revolution is only just started. That's a little red bit on the right-hand side. The Industrial Revolution took about 100 years or so to get off the ground. And so if you do your maths, you come up with this, that, in fact, the healthcare revolution has still got about 72 years of advancement left. I mean, we can achieve massive things in 72 years, and that's only when it actually catches up with things like the Industrial Revolution. We've got huge possibilities here, infinite and incomparable in the long run of history as well. And so we need to look at some big trends in personal well-being and personal healthcare management, personal genomics, body data, biohacking, brain 2.0. Interesting thing here, and we are talking about blue sky stuff here a little bit, about the world of 2030 and beyond. We have a phrase in the futurist world. It's called Humanity 2.0. What is Humanity 2.0? It's based on the very simple belief that the human body is not a given. It's actually a work in progress. And that the technologies will increasingly allow us to change the bits we don't want or change the bits we want to change and so on. So Humanity 2.0 is the next generation, if you like, of running our own bodies. And your industry will be very much part of that as well. So the future Internet of Me, think about it, all the information. Some of you in this room might even be wearing things like a Fitbit. Anyone here with a Fitbit? God, you lazy so-and-so. Zero. Wait, know where I'm going on that. So really, we're talking about a world increasingly where implants will replace external equipment. It's happening now, actually, but it'll happen big time within the next 10 years or so, 15 years, implants and so on, adding and enhancing, if you like, the human possibility. Humanity 2.0, never offline, always on. And your role as an industry will be very much part of that, because you will be producing the devices that help target all of that possibility. Home health and wearable device innovation. The top line is where we are now, really, or were. On the left is the wristwatch, and then you've got the smartwatch. Right in the middle, the hearing aid of today, we're all familiar with it. Maybe in-the-mouth hearing aid will be part of the next generation. So all sorts of things happening. You're probably all familiar with this one. This is made by Bose, and it's an augmented reality device that you wear as in a form of spectacles, and it will enhance the sound of your experiences. And so really it's actually attacking the whole notion of audible well-being. Custom fit hearable, that's 3D printed, by the way, so that this person exercising, their entire vital signs are being monitored through a device that's also part of their hearing apparatus. You can see where we're going on that, smart devices. Look at stem cell research. It might lead to hereditary hearing loss treatment. I'm sure some of you are aware of this, right? While hearing aids and implants can provide good recovery of hearing function, and development of a biological method to repair the damaged cochlea has the potential to restore normal hearing without any type of prosthesis. Well, very interesting. And that's happening right across the board. So I'll close, a couple of closing thoughts here. Time's always against us on these things. Is actually, in the long run, futurists are obsessed with the next great frontier, which is the brain, the human brain. We think we know about the brain, we don't. We know very, very little. And really, if you look forward, exploring this next frontier of the brain is going to be a very top of the agenda. Now, I thought I'd share with you this thing called the 2045 Initiative. It already exists. It's backed by a Russian billionaire's money, actually. And it's called the 2045 Initiative because his institute that's chasing this thing aims that by 2045, they would have developed the capacity to transfer the entire contents of a human brain to an external avatar, whether you like it or not, but entire, even including, I presume, your soul. That all your knowledge, everything else, all your images, your memories, and so on can be transferred to an external avatar. Why they want to do it, I don't know. It's all a bit sinister, but I thought I'd share that with you. It's quite a serious project. Have a look at it if you get the time. Because it's already half possible. As I say, 60% of the technology is already available, and 40% will be developed over the next 20, 30 years. So that's the Avatar R&D network of the 2045 Initiative. Why am I saying this? Is because the brain actually is a very important bit. I just thought I'd remind you that it's your brain that hears, not your ears. It's your brain. And in the longer run, developments with brain science will be the next generation of hearing technology. Because you get into the brain, you don't improve the ears, you actually get into the whole neurological cortex, if you like. Very interesting article I read recently, The Future of the Brain, published in Scientific American. Through technology, inventions that until recently were considered pure nuts, pure fantasy, a direct link between brains, machines that can reconstruct dreams, tiny solar panels embedded in the neurons, etc., are now facts of life. And I think that is the entry point, if you like, for a future generation of hearing healthcare and hearing healthcare technology. And I'll close with this thought then, because if everything else fails, we'll always have insects. You might think, this guy's nuts. Well, insects. Hearing aids are still large, uncomfortable, and as yet unable to deliver the rich and powerful, wonderful sounds we take for granted. There may be a new way for us to replace damaged hearing from an unlikely source, the insect world. Guy down at University of Bristol working on this. Yeah, because insects do have, you can see there, do have quite interesting hearing systems, and they're far more acute than the human one as well. And if you think, well, that's a bit weird, going into insects, listen, by the time all of that happens, we'll all be living on insects, because the next generation of foodstuffs, the next generation of protein will come from insects. So lunch, ladies and gentlemen, will look something like this. And with that, sir, I'll draw to a close. And thank you all for listening. And say welcome to the future and enjoy your listening. Thanks very much.